Odiga did not mention the vehicle. He saw it reflected faintly in the glass before it moved on, its headlights diffused by rain, its presence deliberate but not brazen. He had learned long ago that reacting too quickly gave power to shadows. Better to let them believe they were unseen. Still, he made a quiet note. The next morning unfolded with unnatural normalcy. Assistants brought coffee. Schedules were reviewed. Messages from concerned partners accumulated in careful language. Phrases like temporary volatility and confidence in due process appeared repeatedly. Markets did not panic, but they did not trust either. That middle ground was often more dangerous. Odiga arrived at headquarters earlier than usual. The lobby staff straightened when he entered, their smiles professional but searching. Rumors had weight. They traveled through marble halls and executive elevators as efficiently as electricity. He greeted them with the same measured nod he always offered. Stability was sometimes performance. Upstairs, legal counsel had already assembled. The investigation announcement had been drafted strategically. Anonymous sources. Allegations without specifics. Language implying concern without accusation. It was sophisticated. Whoever engineered it understood both media and regulation. That narrowed possibilities. He listened while his chief compliance officer summarized the formal notice from regulators. A comprehensive review of procurement procedures. A request for communication records. A freeze on certain expansion permits pending clarification. All standard procedure, the officer concluded. Yes, Odiga said. Standard, but sequenced. Silence followed. He did not elaborate. He did not need to. The pattern was becoming clearer. Pressure from investors connected to competing consortiums. Environmental groups quietly funded by firms he had refused to partner with. Now regulators appearing with impeccable timing. Ethics were expensive. He had always known that. Later that afternoon, one of his long-standing partners requested a private call. The man spoke cautiously, choosing each word as if it were fragile. "You've made enemies," he said finally. "I assumed that," Odiga replied evenly. "Not the usual kind." Odiga did not ask for clarification. He understood. That evening, Chinaza waited in his office instead of their home. She stood by the wide windows overlooking the city. The rain had stopped, but the streets still gleamed. From above, everything looked orderly. Traffic moved in steady lines. Lights blinked predictably. It was almost convincing. "You changed your route today," she said without turning. "Yes." They followed the old one. He stilled for a fraction of a second. "How do you know?" She faced him then. Patterns. He studied her expression. There was no fear in it. Only calculation. "You should not involve yourself," he said quietly. She tilted her head slightly. "I am already involved." He could not argue that. The following days intensified. Media outlets began publishing deeper analysis. Opinion pieces questioned his leadership style. Anonymous insiders described him as rigid, inflexible, resistant to compromise. The narrative was shifting from alleged misconduct to personality critique. It was subtle character erosion. At the next board meeting, the tone had changed. Concern was no longer disguised. "We need to consider optics," one director said carefully. "Optics follow substance," Odiga replied. "Markets react to perception. Markets also recover when truth stabilizes." A pause. "We are suggesting," another director interjected, "that you consider a temporary leave. Not resignation. Simply distance." He let the suggestion settle in the air. "Distance implies concession," he said. "I will not concede to accusations that lack evidence." "You may not have a choice." The words were quiet, measured. He met the speaker's gaze. "There is always a choice." Afterward, as the room emptied, he remained seated. Chinaza entered once the door closed. She had been waiting outside, silent as always. "They are fracturing," she observed. "Yes." "Not all." "No." She walked slowly around the table. her fingers tracing the polished wood. Two of them are afraid. One is compromised. He looked up sharply. Compromised how? Financial exposure. Not directly tied to you, but vulnerable. He absorbed that. You are certain? She nodded once. He did not ask how she knew. That night he returned home later than usual. Security presence had increased discreetly. Not visible enough to alarm neighbors, but sufficient to signal awareness. Again, a vehicle passed slowly. This time it did not linger. Inside, Odigu reviewed acquisition files from 3 years prior. A port redevelopment project he had refused due to environmental irregularities. A transportation corridor proposal backed by a consortium that included funds now indirectly connected to Amanda's firm. Amanda. She had remained publicly silent. No statements. No interviews. But silence could be strategy. He remembered their final negotiation months ago. She had offered flexibility, subtle adjustments to compliance benchmarks in exchange for accelerated investment. He had declined. Not aggressively. Simply firmly. He had believed the matter closed. Perhaps it had only shifted. Chinaza entered carrying tea. You are revisiting old decisions, she said. Yes. Regret. No, he paused. Assessment. She placed the cup beside him. They expected you to bend. They miscalculated. Not entirely. He glanced at her. They calculated pressure, she continued softly. They underestimated endurance. He leaned back in his chair, eyes closing briefly. Endurance is not infinite. No, she agreed. But it is greater than theirs. The regulator's audit progressed with clinical efficiency. Teams arrived, reviewed documents, interviewed procurement officers. Everything was documented, transparent, precise. Yet rumors continued to circulate. Stock values dipped further. Not collapsing, but weakening enough to create anxiety. Analysts debated his future. Commentators speculated about leadership transition, isolation, destabilization. A private message arrived from an unknown sender late one evening. Stand down. It will resolve. No signature. He deleted it without response. The next day, one of his regional managers resigned unexpectedly. Officially for personal reasons. Unofficially under pressure. The manager had overseen a division connected to the investigated contract. Odigu felt the tightening. Chinaza noticed before he spoke. They are removing supports, she said. Yes. To make you appear alone. Yes. She stepped closer. You are not. He looked at her steadily. Why are you so certain of outcomes? Her expression shifted, not evasive but distant. Because this is not the end of your path. And if you are wrong? I am not. Her certainty unsettled him more than doubt would have. Another week passed. The board convened again, this time with external advisors present. Consultants spoke in measured tones about risk mitigation, reputation management, strategic transition planning. He listened without interruption. When they finished, he stood slowly. I built this company on transparent procurement, environmental integrity, and infrastructure that outlives quarterly cycles, he said evenly. If those principles are liabilities, then the problem is not leadership. No one responded immediately. After the meeting, 2 directors approached him privately. Their loyalty was not performative. We believe in you, one said. But pressure is mounting. From where? Odigu asked. They hesitated. Investment groups are threatening withdrawal. Names. They exchanged glances. Several are connected through layered funds, indirectly tied to a larger private consortium. He already knew. Amanda's network was extensive but rarely visible at the surface. That evening, Chinaza stood again at the window. The storm is not loud, she murmured. It is patient, he replied. She nodded. A notification buzzed on his secure device. An investigative journalist had requested comment on newly surfaced internal emails suggesting preferential communication with a subcontractor. He frowned. Those emails are incomplete. Edited. Chinaza asked. Yes. Then they will publish fragments. They already have. He felt the slow erosion she had predicted. Not a decisive strike. A wearing down. Later that night, security reported the same vehicle had appeared twice within the week. Different license plates. Similar model. Escalate monitoring, he instructed calmly. He did not tell Chinaza. She already knew. Days blended into strategy sessions and controlled responses. His legal team prepared detailed rebuttals. Compliance officers assembled exhaustive documentation. Yet each clarification seemed to generate another question. He was not fighting evidence. He was fighting narrative. Amanda finally broke her silence. In a televised interview, she spoke broadly about the need for adaptive leadership in modern infrastructure markets. She did not mention him by name. She did not need to. The implication was surgical. Chinaza watched the broadcast beside him. She is positioning, she said. Yes. For succession. He turned toward her. You believe this is about acquisition? Control, she corrected gently. Not ownership. Influence. He exhaled slowly. If I step aside, even temporarily, they consolidate. Yes. And if I refuse, they intensify. Silence filled the room. Then I refuse, he said. Her gaze held his for a long moment. Very well. The following week brought another development. A whistleblower complaint surfaced, anonymous again, alleging internal pressure within his company to expedite environmental approvals. Fabricated, he knew instantly. But investigations did not operate on intuition. Regulators expanded their review. Board members grew restless. One director requested a confidential vote on leadership contingency planning. It did not pass, but the margin was narrower than before. He felt it then. Not fear, but proximity. Chinaza sensed it too. You are close to something, she said one evening as they sat in near darkness. Close to losing? He asked quietly. She shook her head. Close to revelation. He considered that. Whose? She did not answer directly. Pressure reveals structure. Weak beams crack first. He stared at the city lights below. And what if I am the beam? You are the foundation, she replied softly. Foundations do not crack quietly. Another vehicle slowed across the street. This time security intercepted it discreetly. The driver claimed to be lost. Documentation appeared legitimate. But the message was clear. They were being watched. Odigu returned to his desk after midnight. Documents spread before him. Contracts. Emails. Financial disclosures. He traced connections between investment funds and regulatory advisory boards. Patterns tightened. It was not a single adversary. It was alignment. Competing interests temporarily unified by inconvenience, him. Chinaza placed a hand lightly on the back of his chair. They believe erosion is invisible, she said. He covered her hand with his own. And is it? Only to those who do not look. He closed the final file. I will not step down, he said quietly. Not under shadow. Outside, the city moved as it always did, unaware of the currents shifting within its tallest towers. Inside, the storm gathered weight without thunder. Morning arrived without ceremony. The sky was pale, almost indifferent, as if the city had decided not to participate in the tension coiling through its highest offices. Odigu rose before dawn, not from rest but from calculation. Sleep had become shallow, functional. His mind no longer drifted. It arranged. In the kitchen, Chinaza was already awake. She stood at the counter, reading something on her tablet. The light from the screen traced a quiet line across her face. You anticipated this, he said. I anticipated movement, she replied. Not form. He poured coffee slowly. There is a difference. Yes. Form determines counterweight. He studied her. And what form is emerging? She turned the screen toward him. A financial analysis blog had published a detailed breakdown of interlinked funds pressuring his board. It was meticulous, anonymous, but not amateur. They are no longer hiding coordination, she said. No, he agreed. They are accelerating. Acceleration meant confidence, or desperation. At headquarters, tension had crystallized into routine. Assistants spoke in lowered tones. Meetings were scheduled back-to-back, not because there were more decisions, but because uncertainty demanded activity. His chief legal officer entered his office without ceremony. They've requested expanded access to internal messaging platforms, she said, within regulatory rights. Grant it, Odigu replied immediately. She hesitated. They're fishing. They will not find corruption. They may find interpretation. He allowed a faint smile. Interpretation is inevitable. After she left, he opened a secure file containing archived negotiation transcripts from 2 years prior. He reread his exchange with Amanda during the final port redevelopment meeting. She had been composed, strategic. She had never raised her voice. She had spoken of growth, adaptability, partnership. He had spoken of compliance thresholds and ecological assessments. The room had been polite. The outcome had been final. He had underestimated memory. The board convened again that afternoon. This time, the agenda included leadership resilience strategy. He listened as consultants presented scenarios. Market stabilization through temporary executive restructuring. Delegation of authority. Appointment of interim oversight. It was packaged as protection. Protection from what? He asked calmly. Volatility, one consultant replied. Or from me? Silence answered. A director cleared his throat. We are navigating perception. Investors need reassurance. Reassurance of integrity, Odigu said. Not absence. Integrity is not always visible during scrutiny. He leaned forward slightly. Then we make it visible. After the meeting, 2 directors lingered behind. The loyal ones. The uneasy ones. They are counting votes, one said quietly. For removal. For temporary displacement. He nodded once. How many? Closer than before. Numbers were currency. He understood their weight. That evening, Chinaza did not wait by the window. She sat at his desk, reviewing a printed chart of investment flows. You are tracing the upstream source, he observed. Yes. And the funds appear fragmented, but they converge at advisory intersections. Meaning, regulatory consultants who previously worked with Amanda's consortium. He exhaled slowly. Influence layered through expertise. Yes. He sat opposite her. Can it be exposed? Not easily. It is not illegal. Just aligned. She met his gaze. Alignment is powerful. A message arrived from one of his regional project leads. Local environmental groups had staged a small protest outside a construction site, citing the ongoing investigation. Media coverage was limited but intentional. They are shaping the ground narrative, Chinaza said softly. Yes. Your refusal to bend is being reframed as rigidity that hides wrongdoing. He nodded. Character erosion. She stood and moved toward the window at last. The city below was restless tonight. Traffic moved more aggressively, as if urgency had spread into the streets. You could end this, she said without turning. By conceding. Yes. And validate their design? Silence. You are not meant to fall yet, she repeated quietly. He rose and joined her. You say that as if it is written. It is not written, she replied. It is structured. He looked at her profile, illuminated by distant headlights. Structured by whom? She did not answer directly. Forces align beyond intention. He did not press further. The following morning brought escalation. A major financial publication released a feature titled, Is Odigu's Era Ending? It was speculative but thorough. It cited unnamed insiders, declining investor confidence, regulatory scrutiny. It did not accuse outright. It questioned. Questions were more corrosive than accusations. Stock prices dipped again, modestly, but enough to trigger algorithmic trading patterns that amplified movement. Analysts began recommending caution. At noon, his communications director entered with urgency masked as professionalism. "We need a public statement," she said. "Direct. Personal. I have already issued formal responses. This needs to be you. Visible." He considered. Visibility carried risk. But absence allowed projection. "Schedule a press briefing," he said. Chinaza watched the broadcast from a private room. Odiger stood before cameras with steady composure. He did not deflect. He did not attack. He reiterated transparency, invited scrutiny, affirmed commitment to environmental and financial compliance. He did not mention Amanda. He did not mention pressure. When asked if he would step aside during investigation, he answered calmly, "Leadership is not a convenience. It is responsibility." The statement circulated widely. Reactions were divided. Some praised resolve. Others interpreted defiance. That night, the vehicle returned. Security intercepted it again, more assertively this time. The driver's story shifted under questioning. Not criminal. Not actionable. But inconsistent. Odigu listened to the report in silence. "They are measuring response," Chinaza said after security left. "Yes. They want to see fear. They will not." She turned to him. "Be careful." He studied her expression. There was something new there. Not doubt. Not fear. Awareness deepening. "Of what?" he asked quietly. "Isolation." The word lingered. The next board session was different. A formal motion was introduced. Temporary delegation of executive authority pending conclusion of investigation. It was framed as strategic neutrality. Odiga did not react immediately. He allowed discussion to unfold. Voices cautious. Arguments polished. When voting began, he counted silently. The margin narrowed further. The motion did not pass. But the numbers were close enough to fracture confidence. Afterward, one director avoided his gaze. Another met it apologetically. The compromised one. Chinaza had been right. That evening, Odigu requested a private meeting with that director. Not accusatory. Not confrontational. "I value transparency," he said calmly. "If there are concerns, voice them directly." The director hesitated, then exhaled. "There are pressures you cannot see." "I see more than you think. It's not personal." "It never is," Odigu replied evenly. The director looked away. Withdrawal of capital has consequences. So does surrender. They sat in silence for a moment. "Are you certain you can withstand this?" The director asked quietly. Odigu considered the question carefully. "Certainty is irrelevant. I will withstand it." When he returned home, Chinaza was waiting. "They tried again," she said. "Yes." "They will not stop." "No." She approached him slowly. "Then we must change posture." He raised an eyebrow. "How?" "Not defense. Exposure." He watched her closely. "You have something." "Fragments," she said. "Patterns. Enough to suggest coordination. Enough to prove." "Not yet." He felt the shift. "Then we gather more." She nodded once. In the days that followed, Odigu authorized a discreet internal audit. Not of himself, but of board-level financial entanglements. Quiet. Surgical. He did not announce it. Chinaza worked late beside him each night. Her silence was not passive. It was active observation. She traced connections with precision, mapping advisory overlaps, shared legal counsel, synchronized investment movements. The pattern grew clearer. A private consortium had gradually acquired minority stakes in funds influencing his board. Indirect control. Subtle leverage. Amanda's signature was not visible. But her architecture was. Another media piece surfaced, this one alleging internal division within his leadership team. It cited anonymous sources again. They are escalating narrative frequency, Chinaza said. Yes. To exhaust you. He leaned back in his chair. They misunderstand fatigue. She studied him. Do they? He met her gaze. Fatigue sharpens. A call came late one evening from an unexpected number. Amanda. He answered without hesitation. Odigu, she said smoothly. You look tired. I am busy. I imagine so. A pause. You could end this, she said softly. By stepping aside? By adapting. He did not respond immediately. The market evolves, she continued. Rigid structures collapse. Ethics are not rigidity. Interpretation varies. He let silence stretch. This does not need to become destructive, she added. It already has. Only if you resist. And if I comply. You preserve legacy. He almost smiled. Legacy built on compromise is not preservation. Another pause. You were always principled, she said. It makes you predictable. Predictability can be strength. Or vulnerability. The line went quiet for a moment. You will fall eventually, she said, not as threat but observation. Not yet, he replied calmly. The call ended. Chinaza had listened from across the room. She is confident, she said. Yes. Overconfident. He considered that. Perhaps. The next morning, regulators announced an interim report. No conclusive findings. Investigation ongoing. Compliance largely intact, but review continuing. It was neither exoneration nor condemnation. Markets reacted cautiously. Board members convened again. This time, the motion for temporary delegation resurfaced with renewed urgency. Votes were cast. The margin narrowed further. It failed again. But barely. After the meeting, Odigu remained seated alone. Very close. He felt it now. Not defeat but convergence. Chinaza entered quietly. They are reaching threshold, she said. Yes. She stepped closer. So are you. He looked up at her. Threshold of what? Reversal. He studied her expression. You are certain. She did not answer with certainty this time. She answered with conviction. You are not meant to fall this way. Outside, another vehicle slowed. Security moved immediately. Inside, Odigu closed his eyes briefly. Not in surrender but in focus. The storm had gathered density. Not loud. Not chaotic. Heavy. The shift did not announce itself. It emerged in fragments. A delayed wire transfer flagged by internal compliance. A consulting invoice routed through an intermediary firm that shared legal representation with one of the minority funds pressuring his board. A calendar overlap between a regulatory advisor and a private strategy retreat sponsored by a consortium he had once refused. Each detail alone was innocuous. Together they suggested architecture. Odigu sat in his office long after most of the building had emptied. The city outside glowed with practiced indifference, unaware of the quiet recalibration unfolding behind reinforced glass. Chinaza stood across from him, studying a projection of interconnected entities layered across the wall screen. They are careful, she said. Yes. Not careless. No. She zoomed into a cluster of advisory firms. Here. He leaned forward. 2 regulatory consultants, both previously employed by agencies now auditing his company, had accepted speaking engagements funded indirectly by an investment arm aligned with Amanda's consortium. It is not illegal, he said. It is influential, she replied. He exhaled slowly. Influence was softer than corruption. Harder to prosecute. Easier to deny. A secure message arrived from his internal audit team. We found irregular board-level communications. Not incriminating. Coordinated. He read it twice. Compromised. Chinaza murmured. Yes. Which one? Not certain yet. She studied his face. You are not surprised. I am disappointed. He stood and walked toward the window. Traffic below was thinning. Midnight approached. Across the street, a parked car idled with headlights off. Same model, he said quietly. Chinaza did not look. Yes. Escalate? He asked. Not yet. He turned back toward her. You are comfortable being watched? I am aware of being watched. He held her gaze for a moment, then returned to the table. The following morning brought a new development. A senior journalist, known for integrity rather than sensationalism, requested an off-record conversation. Not to attack. To understand. Odigu accepted. They met in a private conference room with no devices permitted beyond secured recording equipment. You are under pressure, the journalist began evenly. Yes. Are the allegations false? They are incomplete. That is not the same. They are framed. The journalist observed him carefully. Do you believe this is coordinated? I believe in patterns. And the pattern? He paused, choosing words deliberately. Interests converging around inconvenience. Inconvenience being you. Inconvenience being refusal. The journalist leaned back. If evidence of coordination existed, would you expose it? Yes. Even if it destabilizes markets further? Yes. The journalist studied him for a long moment. Then find proof. When the meeting ended, Odigu felt neither relief nor tension. Only clarity. The line between endurance and action had narrowed. Back at headquarters, the board's pressure intensified subtly. An emergency session was called without his prior consultation. He attended anyway. We have fiduciary responsibility, one director said firmly. Prolonged uncertainty damages shareholder value. So does capitulation, Odigu replied calmly. We are not suggesting capitulation. We are suggesting optics. Optics without integrity are illusions. Another director interjected. You are making this personal. It became personal when leadership was targeted. Silence rippled across the room. The compromised director avoided eye contact. After the meeting, Chinaza joined him in the conference room once it had emptied. They are accelerating again, she said. Yes. They believe time favors them. Does it? She considered. Time favors structure. And which structure is stronger? She looked at him steadily. Yours. He almost smiled. Confidence without evidence is faith. You have evidence, she said softly. You are deciding when to use it. He did not respond. That evening, the internal audit team delivered a preliminary report in person. Not digital. Not transmitted. The compromised director had attended 2 private strategy dinners hosted by an investment advisory group connected indirectly to Amanda's network. Disclosure had been technically filed, but buried within subsidiary documentation few would examine. Conflict of interest? Odigu asked. Not explicit, the auditor replied. But suggestive. Enough. Enough to question impartiality. Odigu nodded once. When the auditors left, Chinaza remained seated, reviewing the printed documents. They are relying on ambiguity, she said. Yes. Ambiguity can be illuminated. He studied her. At cost. She met his gaze. What is the cost of silence? He turned away briefly, weighing the balance. Another development arrived before dawn. Regulators announced expansion of the investigation to include third-party advisory influence. The language was neutral, but the scope widened. He recognized the maneuver. Someone had tipped them. Amanda was not merely defending. She was probing. At breakfast, Chinaza's composure remained intact, but her silence carried deeper current. They are moving toward consolidation, she said finally. Yes. They expect fracture. They may get it. She looked up sharply. From you. From the board. She absorbed that. Midday brought a market tremor. A major institutional investor reduced its position publicly, citing governance concerns. The stock dipped sharply this time. Emergency meetings followed. Consultants spoke in urgent tones. Communications teams drafted stabilization statements. Analysts speculated openly about leadership change. Within the chaos, Odigu remained composed. "Call the vote," he said quietly. The room stilled. "For what?" a director asked. "For confidence." "You are certain?" "Yes." They hesitated but complied. The vote was closer than any before. It passed. Confidence retained by a margin of 1. Relief did not follow. Chinaza stood beside him as directors filtered out. "They are 1 vote from removing you," she said. "Yes. And you are 1 move from reversing them." He looked at her carefully. "You are certain reversal is possible?" She did not answer immediately. "You are not meant to fall yet," she said again, softer this time. He exhaled slowly. "You speak of destiny. I speak of structure." That night, the vehicle across the street did not idle. It parked. Security approached discreetly. The driver left before questioning could escalate. Inside, Odigu convened a private meeting with his most loyal directors. He presented the internal audit findings. Carefully. Precisely. The room shifted as evidence unfolded. Not illegalities, but alignments. Advisory overlaps. Undisclosed strategic gatherings. Financial pressures routed through intermediaries. "You are suggesting manipulation," one director said quietly. "I am suggesting influence beyond declared interests," Odigu replied. "Why not expose it publicly?" "Because incomplete exposure appears defensive." "And complete exposure requires more." They understood. When the meeting ended, Chinaza remained behind. "You are preparing," she said. "Yes." "For confrontation?" "Yes." She stepped closer. "Be careful of timing. Too soon. Too late is worse." He studied her expression. For the first time, uncertainty flickered beneath her composure. The following week unfolded with escalating subtlety. Media narratives intensified but grew less cohesive. Some outlets began questioning the investigation's breadth. Analysts debated whether the pressure itself signaled competitive aggression. The journalist he had met privately published a balanced piece highlighting the unusual convergence of regulatory expansion and investor withdrawal. Not accusatory. Curious. The narrative fractured slightly. Amanda responded with another interview, emphasizing adaptive governance in volatile markets. She remained indirect, but tension edged her tone. Chinaza noticed. "She is responding," she said. "Yes." She did not expect scrutiny. "No." He leaned back in his chair, fingers steepled. "Confidence shifts." "Slowly," she agreed. That evening, security reported that the vehicle had not returned for 3 consecutive nights. Absence carried meaning. "They are recalibrating," Chinaza murmured. "Yes." He opened a new file on his screen, a comprehensive dossier compiling internal audit findings, investment flow maps, advisory overlaps, and documented board communications. "This is the fulcrum," he said quietly. She watched him assemble the final pages. "Once used," she said, "it cannot be undone." "I know." He closed the file without transmitting it. Morning arrived with an unexpected development. Regulators issued a preliminary clarification. No evidence thus far of improper bidding practices. Investigation ongoing, but primary allegations unsubstantiated at present. Markets reacted cautiously upward. Board members exchanged measured optimism. The compromised director avoided his gaze entirely. Chinaza stood at the window again, watching the city breathe. "They miscalculated your endurance," she said. "Perhaps. They also miscalculated scrutiny." He joined her. "It is not over." "No," she agreed. "But momentum shifts." A call came from Amanda that afternoon. "You are resilient," she said without greeting. "I am consistent." "You are prolonging this." "I am clarifying it." A pause. "You could still negotiate," she offered. "I am not negotiating integrity." "You are negotiating power." He let silence answer. "You believe you can expose coordination?" she asked finally. "I believe in transparency." "Transparency destabilizes." "So does manipulation." The line grew quiet. "You will have consequences," she said softly. "Already have," he replied. When the call ended, Chinaza was watching him closely. "She feels pressure," she said. "Yes. She will escalate." "Likely." "Then you must be ready." He nodded once. That night, there was no vehicle. No idle engine. Only stillness. Odigo reviewed the dossier again. Each page represented risk. Exposure would fracture alliances permanently. Silence would invite continued erosion. He looked at Chinaza. "You have been certain," he said quietly. "From the beginning." "Yes." "Why?" She held his gaze, something deeper than calculation moving behind her eyes. "Because this is not where your structure ends," she said. He stepped closer. "And if it is?" Her expression did not waver. "Then it will not be because you yielded." Outside, the city lights shimmered in restrained motion. Somewhere within its expanse, alliances recalculated. Influence shifted. Pressure redistributed. Inside, Odigo felt the fulcrum beneath his hands. Not loud. Not dramatic. Heavy. The decision did not arrive as impulse. It formed gradually, like condensation gathering along unseen lines of tension. Odiga did not sleep that night. He remained in his study, the dossier open before him, each page weighted with implication. Names. Timelines. Advisory overlaps. Transaction sequences. None individually explosive. Together, suggestive of orchestration. Chinaza did not interrupt him. She sat across the room in silence, reviewing her own set of compiled notes. The quiet between them was not absence. It was alignment. At dawn, the sky lightened without warmth. "You will move today," she said finally. He did not look up. "Yes." "Publicly?" "No." She nodded. "Internally first." "Yes." He closed the file carefully. At headquarters, the atmosphere carried restrained volatility. Markets had steadied slightly after the regulator's preliminary clarification, but analysts remained cautious. Investors were watching for signals. Any deviation, any tremor. Odigo requested a closed executive session. No consultants. No external advisors. Only board members. When they gathered, he stood without ceremony. "I have information relevant to governance integrity," he said calmly. "Before this proceeds further, you should review it." He distributed printed summaries. Not the full dossier. A measured portion. The room shifted as directors scanned the pages. "What is this?" one asked quietly. "Documented intersections between board-level financial engagements and advisory entities influencing regulatory scope," Odigo replied. "You are accusing us?" "I am presenting alignment." The compromised director's hands remained still on the table. "These dinners," another director said slowly, "were disclosed." "Technically," Odigo acknowledged. "Not transparently." Silence thickened. "You are suggesting coordinated pressure," someone murmured. "I am suggesting that governance requires clarity." The compromised director finally spoke. "This is speculative." "It is documented," Odigo replied evenly. "You are diverting attention from investigation." "I am addressing structure." He did not raise his voice. He did not accuse directly. He allowed the implications to breathe. When the meeting adjourned, nothing had resolved. But something had shifted. Directors who had wavered now wore calculation differently. Doubt redistributed. Chinaza waited in his office. "You introduced tension," she said. "Yes." "Not confrontation." "Not yet." She studied his face. "You are measuring reaction." "Yes." "And they did not expect counterweight." She nodded. By afternoon, subtle tremors began to surface. One director requested independent legal review of the disclosed intersections. Another contacted external counsel regarding fiduciary exposure. The compromised director remained silent publicly, but unusually active in private communications. Odiga watched without interference. That evening, an article surfaced online, anonymous, analytical, questioning potential conflicts of interest among corporate boards under regulatory scrutiny. It did not mention names, but timing was deliberate. Chinaza glanced at him from across the room. You did not authorize that. No. Then someone else sees pattern. Yes. Momentum did not roar. It adjusted. The next morning, the vehicle returned. Not idling. Parked. Security approached again. This time, the driver refused to answer questions and left abruptly. A message. Inside, Odigu convened a private session with his internal audit lead. Expand scope, he said. To what extent? Full board financial entanglements over the last 3 years. The auditor hesitated. That will create hostility. It already exists. By midday, Amanda issued a carefully worded statement through her consortium, reaffirming commitment to market stability, denying any involvement in governance disputes, emphasizing respect for regulatory independence. The denial was polished. Chinaza read it without expression. She anticipates escalation, she said. Yes. She is reinforcing distance, which suggests proximity. He leaned back, considering. A board member requested urgent conversation. Privately. When they met, the director appeared unsettled. You've destabilized trust, he said quietly. Trust was already compromised. You cannot wage war internally. I am not waging war. I am exposing architecture. The director sighed. If this fractures the board, markets will react. If markets react to transparency, then fragility existed already. Silence lingered. You are forcing decision, the director said. Yes. Later that evening, Chinaza stood once more at the window.